All right, let's go over VFR sectional charts. VFR sectional charts. Real quick, the reason they're called sectional charts is because if I zoom out here, look at the entire United States, you might notice that looks kind of funny, all blocky on the outside and stuff. Well, the reason is sectional charts are designed to be printed paper charts for various sections throughout the United States, or throughout the world, really. But if you can see, this gets harder to see sometimes when you zoom in. You can see the border line here and there, and you see there's not just a strict grid pattern. So there's another border. So that is a sectional. I believe that's the San Antonio sectional. I'm not sure about that one. There's the Albuquerque sectional, the Dallas-Fort Worth sectional. So these are sectionals that are typically named for the largest airport in the region. So that's why they're called sectional charts, because if you order a printed sectional chart for Dallas-Fort Worth, it's going to be a large piece of paper, like 3 foot by 2.5 foot or something piece of paper that has the chart. Actually, it's not going to have the whole thing. It's going to have like half of it on one side, and you flip it over, and the other half is on the other side. That can make it really hard to use sometimes. This is an advantage of electronic charts, like we're using right here. So this is an online. And notice when I zoom out, I'm losing detail. So as I zoom back in here, I'm regaining the detail. So now we have all the details of a full sectional chart. All right. These are actually really clear to read too. If you're zoomed in good on a chart. So VFRmap.com. If you want to use this for reference, VFRmap.com. You don't have to log in or anything. You just go straight to it and use it off the internet. So the FAA publishes sectional charts, VFR sectional charts, every 56 days. That also means that every 56 days they go bad. Like, they're not legal to use anymore. You have to have the most recent one. So if you're going to be if you're going to be leaving the airport, if you're flying around the airport, you don't have to have one, though it's a good idea. But if you're leaving the airport, if you're doing any kind of cross-country, you are required to have, it's just smart anyway, but you're also required to have a current sectional chart. It doesn't have to be a paper one. You can have it electronically. You just need to make sure that if you're using one on your phone or a tablet, that you have enough battery. It's good to have a backup. Even a backup paper chart that's out of date makes sense, since not a whole lot of things change quickly on these. It doesn't mean it's legal. It just means it's smart to be a safe pilot. All right, so this is what the sectional charts will look like. We're going to go over some things that they contain. Not going to go over all the details. We wouldn't have time to go over all the details. There's lots of them. So I kind of want to start with a small airport to begin with. If I don't zoom in too far. All right. We'll go up the road from where we fly, go up to Tatum, to the Tatum Airport. Now there's actually a mistake on here, but anyway, it is what it is. So Tatum Airport, this is the airport symbol for Tatum. Real quickly, let's look at the various airport symbols. You notice there's some differences. So Tatum has this airport symbol, planes, a little different symbol. It's similar, but a little different. Denver City looks like planes. Lovington looks more like Tatum. And actually, this just updated. I'll go over that. This just changed since the last publication. We go up, look at some other ones. Here's Cochran County and Morton, another airport symbol. There's a different symbol. There's Lubbock. That's a whole different type of symbol, isn't it? All right, so that's what airports look like. Just quickly identifying. There's Hobbs. another different airport symbol, and Hobbs Industrial, that's also different. All right, so let's just take these one at a time and kind of go over what this chart tells us and kind of how to read it. All right, so this is not a road map. We're used to looking at maps with roads and cities. This has roads in it and it has cities in it, but primarily this is a chart for flying, so those references are there just for assistance, but not for navigation. So real quickly, Tatum, the little yellow thing we see here, is the outline of the city. So the yellow indicates, just like planes, the yellow indicates a city. The city of, and it's labeled Lovington. The city of Tatum, the city of Plains. If you go to Hobbs, it's bigger. See the yellow outline. So that yellow outline is basically the outline of the city. Specifically, it is the shape that you will see the city looking like at night. It's the lights, which generally represents the city shape anyway. That helps you recognize a city and differentiate it from something else. So what the idea is you can recognize, it's harder to recognize an airport, it's very small. It's easier at night to recognize a city. Even in the daytime, it's easier to recognize the city first, and then you look for the airport relative to the city. Okay, so if you're flying this way and you see the city, you know the airport's out here to the right of it. So you identify the city first, and then you start looking for the airport and identify that. That's the idea. All right, so here's the airport symbol. This indicates a small airport. There's a different symbol is used for really long runways. If the runway is below 8,069 feet, I believe it is. So if it's, let's just round it and say if it's below about 8,000 feet, which most of them are, it's going to have this type of symbol. It's going to be a round symbol with a line in it indicating the direction of the primary runways. Same with Lovington. You notice we have a line here and a line there. It's showing you the general shape and size of the direction and size of the runways. Now there may be other runways that are not shown on this. This is giving you primary runways, bigger paved runways, showing you what direction they're going, just so you have an idea. You have to look at the chart supplement to find out the specifics of it. All right, the chart supplement is a book that has the details of all these airports. And real handy on this one, if you click on here, it brings up the chart supplement. And it tells you, this is right out of the chart supplement, it gives you information about that airport. Okay, but we're just looking at the chart right now. So Tatum Airport, there's the symbol. There's a star on top of it. That indicates that there is a rotating beacon that you can see at night. So there's a rotating beacon. I don't believe there actually is a rotating beacon that's working in Tatum. Maybe it's still there, but it doesn't work. I know that. So anyway, that's the airport symbol. Rotating beacon is what that star means. So not all of them have that. If they don't have it, they won't have the star. This should help you if you're looking for it at night. If it has a star and you've checked NOTAMs and it's not, and it's in service, then you should be able to identify a beacon at night to help you locate the airport. Okay, so here's the name of the airport and its identifier. So it's airports. All airports have an identifier, not just a name. So this is the name you would call it. This is the identifier, 18T or 18 Tango. All right, that's unique to every airport, I believe, in the whole world. You can see that over here at Plains, we have Yoakum County Airport. It's not called Plains Airport, it's called Yoakum County, and its identifier is Foxtrot 98, F98. All right, so that's what that means. All right, go down to the next line, 3986. That is the elevation of the airport in MSL. So airport elevation, field elevation at the Tatum Airport is 3,986 MSL. That means your altimeter, when you're on the ground with the proper setting, your altimeter should read 3,986 or thereabouts. generally what you do is you round that to, that would easily round to 4,000 feet. So it's about a 4,000 foot elevation, 3986. The next line, the next number you have after the dash is 29. That tells you that the longest runway at that airport, the longest runway is 2,900 feet long. So this is in hundreds of feet, 2,900 feet long. The next number, if there's multiple runways, you're still only going to see the longest one here. So that may not be the one you're using. That may be a crosswind runway that you can't really land on. So you always need to look at the chart supplement when you're planning on flying to another airport. That's actually a requirement of pre-flight planning. The chart doesn't tell you everything you need to know. It gives you basics. You're supposed to have a chart and a chart supplement, both of which are contained on an electronic chart, on pretty much every electronic chart. So we have field elevation, runway length in hundreds of feet. So just add 00 to that, and you have the length of the longest runway on the field. The next number is the frequency, radio frequency for traffic. So the little C here with a circle, it stands for, it's a symbol that tells you this is the CTAF, CTAF, or Common Traffic Advisory Frequency. So in other words, when you come in and you want to advise everyone that may be in the area, that may be flying on the ground or just flying in the area, the common traffic frequency is 122.9. So you announce yourself on 122.9. That's different for various airports. That's the same for Tatum and Plains, or Yoakum County Airport. You see over here we have 122.9. But if you come down to Denver City, you'll notice the common traffic advisory frequency is 122.8. Okay? Oh, and I zoomed in too far. All right. So let's look at some other things. This big, bold number. This big, bold number is the, what's it called? Now I'm drawing a blank. It's the MEF, the maximum elevation figure. Maximum elevation figure. So what that tells you is, we need to zoom out and see. All right, you see these big, bold numbers dotted all throughout here. Okay, all throughout here. So if you can see, there's a quadrant, or quadrangle, I think they call it. Anyway, there's a section within the sectional chart. This is divided up into little rectangles, little blocks. Each block has a maximum elevation figure in it. And what that tells you is, that is the, in hundreds of feet, once again, just like the runway length, in hundreds of feet, that is the approximate, it's rounded, but it's rounded up. It's the maximum elevation of anything that you can run into in this section. So that tells you that if you are at 4,000, if you have your altimeter set at 4,700 feet, if you are flying at 4,700 feet, and that's what your altimeter is reading, and you have a proper setting, you're flying at 4,700 feet, you should not run into anything in this section. Okay, but as you fly into the next section, you're not guaranteed now, because now you see the maximum elevation figure is 6,400 feet. So 6,400 and then add 00. So if you're flying in this section, you need to be flying above 4,700 feet if you don't want to run into something. That doesn't mean you have to fly that high. That just means if you're doing cross country and you want to make sure that you don't run into something. Say it's nighttime and mountains don't have lights on them. So, and some towers don't have lights when the lights burn out. So there are things sticking up that can run into your airplane. So if you want to play it safe, if you don't know the region, if you can't see very well, in this case it would be just like at nighttime. If you're not familiar with where you're at, stay above this while you're flying in this section, and you'll be fine. And I would stay well above that. like at least 500 feet, maybe 1,000 feet above it. But that's what that tells you. It tells you this is the maximum elevation figure, MEF, for this section. All right? So we have these little guys, these little teepee looking things. These are towers. There's different symbols for towers, but this is the symbol for towers below 1,000 feet. If you have a tower that's 1,000 feet tall or taller, that looks like this. It's this long sloping, looks like the Eiffel Tower. So it's clearly taller than the other towers. All right, there's numbers next to each one of these towers. The numbers, an easy way to remember this is like so. The big number on top is what your altimeter reads when you hit the top of the tower. The number below is how far you're going to fall after hitting the tower before you hit the ground. Okay, it's an easy way to remember it. Kind of a silly example, but the top of the tower is at 4,347 feet MSL. So that's what your altimeter ought to be reading when you hit the top of it. The tower itself is 319 feet above the ground. That's how tall it is. But you don't know where the ground is at when you're flying. You know altitudes in MSL because you fly using an altimeter. So this is the number that's most important to you. Notice there's a pretty close correlation between these two. So this tower is actually pretty close to the top, to the maximum elevation figure. So that probably tells you that either this is a really tall point or this is, or the ground is pretty flat here, which we know it is. All right, so that's what those tower numbers mean. They're all the same. They all mean the same thing. Now that doesn't mean there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 towers. That may mean there's 6 towers there, but very, very frequently you may have 3 or 4 towers in this group, and it just gives you a couple of symbols and tells you how tall they are. So they can be grouped together. So don't think that these are necessarily representing the exact number of towers. That's not the case. Same with this wind farm up here. It's pretty easy to recognize. The wind farm symbol looks just like a windmill. So this little grouping here tells you that there is a wind farm, not with 3 windmills, but there's a wind farm in this section here, and the top of the windmills are at 4,544 feet. Now you notice the UC. That means it's under construction. That means it's still growing. They're not all there yet. So that's going to change. But if we look up at another wind farm, we see here's a large section. It gives you the outline of what the shape is. There may be hundreds of them in here. And it tells you the maximum altitude or maximum elevation for those windmills is 4,388 feet. So you definitely need to stay above that to keep from hitting the top of a windmill. Remember, when you're flying at night, windmills have lights on them. Some of them do. A lot of times they'll alternate. Not all of them will have a light on them. But remember, the light is not on the blade, so the blade goes up above that light. So that's what the 4,388 tells you is the highest point of that windmill that you could run into. All right. So let's move down to a different airport. Actually, let's move over to Plains. So Yoakum County, there's a city of Plains. There's some towers around. We see their elevation and their height above the ground. So this is Yoakum County Airport. Identifier Foxtrot 9 or 8. Field elevation is 3,705 feet. This is really important when you're landing because you need to know a traffic pattern is typically 1,000 feet above the ground or above the field elevation. So you need to know that your traffic pattern, you expect it to be about 4,700 feet. Okay, the L here, the asterisk and the L, tells you that the airport has lights, that the runways are lighted, or at least one runway is lighted. So it has lighting. 50, the 50, you add 2 zeros to it, that's the length of the longest runway. That means the longest runway here is 5,000 feet. You don't know which one that is. You'd have to look at the chart supplement for that. But know that you have the longest runway is 5,000 feet. Common traffic advisory frequency is 122.9er. All right. Now, one thing to notice, this symbol has these little arms sticking out of it, these little blocks. That means that there is fuel on that airport. Now, that doesn't mean that there's always fuel available. That means that they do have fuel service here. That could be Jet A, that could be 100 low lead, it could be even MoGas, but it tells you there's fuel here. You'd have to check the chart supplement to see what fuel is available and whether it's self-serve or not. Some airports, you'll fly in at night thinking they have fuel, and they only have full service, and they're only staffed 8 hours a day, so they're not there in the middle of the night. So chart supplement is definitely an important thing to look at. If you click on here, there we go. We get the chart supplement, and it talks about fuel. So here's your service. Fuel, 100 low lead. Lighting is dusk to dawn, and it tells what kind of runway light you have. You can look this up somewhere else. So runway 3 and 21 have medium intensity runway lighting. Anyway, and so on. So airport remarks: attended irregularly. Fuel available 24 hours, self-serve. That's really important to know if you need fuel. But that's what that means. The little arms outside of here indicate fuel. All right. Let's look at Denver City. All right, Denver City Airport is Echo 57. Field elevation is 3,575 feet. It does have runway lighting, and the longest runway is 5,800 feet. Common traffic advisory frequency 122.8. All right, it has something else. RP 22 and 26. So it tells you that runways 22 and 26 fly a right-hand pattern. So standard pattern at all airports is left-hand. At an uncontrolled airport, left-hand pattern is standard unless it specifies otherwise. I'm not actually sure that they always specify this on the chart, but this one does. You would find this in the chart supplement again. But this one shows it on the chart, right pattern for 22 and 26. So if you're going to land on runway 22 or runway 26, they want you to fly a right-hand pattern. Why is that? Well, it's because they're trying to get you to avoid something. Maybe avoid a city, maybe avoid populated areas, or possibly like towers. Maybe there's a tower on the other side that you're going to get close to if you fly a left-hand pattern. All right, let's move over to Hobbs Industrial, where we fly. Now we have a different symbol. Notice it's still magenta, this pinkish color, it's magenta, but notice we don't have a circle anymore. And we don't have a little tower, we don't have a beacon, not a tower, but a beacon. Because there is no beacon at Hobbs Industrial. There's also no lighting at Hobbs Industrial, and sure enough, we see this, it doesn't have anything about lights. In fact, there's several things it doesn't have. But the symbol is now these big runway symbols. This is the symbol you get whenever your runways are longer than 8,069 or 8,067 feet. So basically, when they're above around 8,000 feet, they are shown like this. So notice that the Hobbs Regional Airport has shorter runways. They're shorter than ours. So it actually has the circular symbol, but it's blue. All right, so this is a good time to point out the differences here. Airports in magenta color are non-towered airports. Towered airports are always shown in blue. Okay, blue, no matter what the shape, blue means it's a towered airport. All right, well, we clearly don't have a tower here. So let's go through, let's see what this is called. So it's just called industrial. We call it Hobbs Industrial. So there's a note up here in parentheses that it's private. That doesn't mean you can't land there, but it does mean that it's private. It's not a public airport. So private airport, if you want to find out more about that, you look in the chart supplement again. The name is industrial. Where's the identifier? There's not an identifier for this one, which is kind of strange, and I can't even click on it. So this has dropped off. The identifier is NM, so November Mike 83, NM83, New Mexico 83. But for some reason, it's dropped off the chart here. It's not here. So I don't know why that is. So industrial is the name of the airport. NM83 is what it would say here if it had it. Field elevation is 3707 or 3700 if you round it. The length of the longest runway is 8,800 feet. That would be 12. Oh, 12 and 30. We know that because we fly there, but 8,800 feet. This little symbol is pretty easy to figure out. It's a glider, has a little G diamond on top of it, telling you this is also a glider port. Now, this is not just to tell you, hey, this is a good place to go fly gliders. It's a warning. This is here because it's a warning for airplanes, because gliders tend to fly without talking on the radio. Some of them don't even have radios, and they tend to fly high. They don't fly in straight lines. We turn and we do stuff different. We're changing altitude constantly and constantly turning. We're maybe chasing a cloud here and there. There's no telling what we're going to do. So because of that erratic behavior, they put this symbol on here. Now, we can be flying anywhere here, but this is a warning letting you know this is also a glider port. All right, so let's move down to Hobbs now. All right, Hobbs is blue. That means it's a towered airport. Now, if you've gone over the airspace, you'll notice there's something else here designating this blue segmented circle designates this airspace as Class Delta. This is a Class Delta airspace, which means there's a cylinder that comes up. If we looked at the ground level here, the cylinder would come up to 6,200 feet. This segmented square here tells you that the top of the Class Delta cylinder, the top of this airspace, is 6,200 feet. So this is in hundreds of feet as well. Now that's MSL. So we have Hobbs, we have the field elevation, it is 3,661 feet. And the top, so what do we have? About 2,600 feet higher than that is the top of the airspace. So it's about 2,600 feet above the ground level is where this airspace stops. So if you're flying at 7,000 feet, which is above 6,200 feet, you can fly right over the top of that airspace and never have to talk to Hobbs. You don't have to tell them you're there. They may or may not even know you're there. But as long as you're out of their airspace, you don't have to talk to them. So that's the cylinder. That's how it's defined. It's defined by this circle, which is, I'm not sure, I think 4 nautical miles, I think, in radius. But anyway, that's the circle. That's how it's defined. Now this symbol, it looks like it cuts into our airport symbol. It does cut into the symbol, but that symbol is enlarged. It doesn't mean the airport's really that big. Our airport is just outside of this circle. So that's where we have to be careful to avoid their airspace whenever we're taking off on 1-2. So that's Class Delta. Now, again, remember, with a Class Delta airspace, this is a temporary airspace. So this circle does not count for anything whenever the tower is closed. Class Delta is a temporary airspace. So when the tower is closed, this doesn't mean anything. It's just an airport symbol. So you can just think about it without the circle there. All right, let's read the airport information. Lee County Regional is the name of that airport, and its identifier is HOB, Hotel Oscar Bravo. Now that will have a K in front of it. In fact, I think if we click on it here, if we look at the chart supplement, yeah. So Lee County Regional, KHOB, so Kilo Hotel Oscar Bravo, KHOB. So a lot of bigger airports, particularly ones with weather, it has something to do with an ICAO identification. They'll have a K in front of them instead of these other numbers that we have at other ones, like Lovington, Lee County Zip Franklin Memorial is Echo 06. It doesn't have weather. It's not a ICAO airport, so you have these numbers. But bigger airports, typically they're larger, but not always. They will have a what's implied in front of this is a K, so HOB or KHOB. All right, so we have something new here. CT stands for control tower. So it's telling you the control tower frequency is, this is not common traffic advisory, this is control tower. Frequency is 120.65. The C here indicates that this is also common traffic advisory frequency because this tower is not active all the time. So you use the same frequency to talk to the tower, and the same frequency, you use the same frequency as when the tower is shut down and you're just flying in and talking to the main, using main traffic advisory. So ATIS is Automatic Terminal Information Services. This is weather and airport information. So when the tower is active, they'll have an ATIS, which gets updated every hour. Let's see, 5 minutes before the top of the hour, unless there's something special, and then they'll update it. But so basically, if you want to listen, tune in and listen to the radio, tune in on 119.75 on your radio, and you will listen to weather and any kind of NOTAMs, anything that's going on. So basically what you hear is your altimeter setting, your wind, temperature, dew point, any kind of weather that's significant that they'll put on there. And they'll also, when we're flying gliders, they will put on there, use caution around Hobbs Industrial Air Park for glider activity. So the Automatic Terminal Information Service is a pre-recorded message that just loops over and over again until it's updated. It's on 119.75, and it tells you the airport information you need to know when you're flying into that airport, like altimeter setting, wind direction and strength and gusts, sometimes what runway is in use, that's sometimes on there, and any kind of significant weather or other hazards, okay, or like caution for birds, migrating birds on the runway. That's important too. They'll put that on an ATIS. Okay, the rest of this looks pretty similar. Airport field elevation is 3661 feet. There is lighting. So there's lighted runways, or at least one of them. Longest runway is 7,400 feet. And I don't actually remember what this is. This 122.95. I'm not sure what that is. We can find out if we go to the chart supplement. And you go down to communications. 122.95 is Unicom. Unicom. So that's like a private frequency. In other words, the airport. It's not a. I don't really know the designation on this. I think what this is this is the frequency. Unicom frequency is like what you would talk to somebody that runs an FBO. In fact, I think Tailwind Aviation uses 122.95 to like talk to you about getting fuel or something. Like you would call in and say, hey, can you get the fuel truck ready? We're about to come in. I believe that's what that is. Or you could get them to advise you on something that's going on at the airport. But a lot of times this is not even in use anymore. This is something I think that used to be used more than it is now. So, and I can tell you, I've never used Unicom for flying in and out of Hobbs. I've always used 120.65, the control tower, or the CTAF frequency, and ATIS, and that's it. All right. So something else in Hobbs here is this great big circle, and you notice at the middle of it is this symbol. So that's a VORTAC. This is a radio navigation aid. This is something you use to navigate your plane into this airspace, out of it to transition. Notice these blue lines here and here and here. These are airways. These are called Victor Airways. Called Victor Airways because their names are labeled, if I can find it, they're labeled with V's or Victor. So Victor, that's a Victor 102 airway. So these are airways for radio navigation. This is how you used to navigate using radio navigation all over the country. So you would go from VOR to VOR to VOR to VOR. So if you wanted to go like from here to there, you would go VOR to VO. You could do several things here, but VOR, VOR, VOR. Maybe you come out this way or straight here. So those airways connect you across the country. Not necessarily airport to airport, but navigation aid to navigation aid. And so you have instrumentation that guides, that keeps you lined up with these. Think of it as a beacon that tells you what radial you're on. So you tune into this device, and it tells you what radial you're on. In this case, you would be on the 113 degree radial. So if you get off of it, you have needles, you have instruments in your airplane that would keep you on this radial. So you stay on the path, on the airway, and fly to here, and then you go out on some different radial, and you keep on that path. That's what that's about. And so the compass rose that's surrounding it, you have a line pointing at 0 degrees, that's north, and then 360 degrees clockwise around that. So these are magnetic headings. That gives you a magnetic heading. It's also helpful for when you're planning, when you're flight planning. If you know you want to go from here to over here, then you can basically take that line with a pencil or whatever, some kind of straight edge, and you say, well, okay, let's line it up on the VOR. That's going to be a heading of about, well, you pick it, maybe it looks like about 50 degrees. So you know generally we're going to be flying a magnetic heading of about 50 degrees, or at least that's the course to get from there to there. So these are helpful even if you're not using VOR navigation. All right, and then this box tells you, this is the identifier box for that VOR. It's the Hobbs VOR, labeled HOB, and this is where that K I mentioned earlier comes into place. So you just have to know that the airport HOB is, the identifier is K, Kilo, Hotel Oscar Bravo, KHOB, not HOB. HOB identifier is actually for the VOR, and those can be way separated. So you need to know that for flight planning, especially electronic flight planning. If you just put HOB in, you're going to get the VOR or the VORTAC, not the airport. So anyway, these are for VOR stuff. So it's channel 1. The frequency to tune into this VOR on your navigation radio is 111.0. The channel 47 is military, so we don't use that. Only military uses that. HOB is the identifier, and there's HOB in Morse code. So when you tune into a VOR, you actually listen to it. You listen to it to verify that it's actually in service, and you're looking for these Morse code identifiers. So it beeps. It's beep beep, beep beep, beep beep, like that, and a high pitched frequency, which I'm not going to mimic. All right, that's what all that means. Let's see, anything else here? You can see this is this gray line, this double line is a divided highway. Highways are a little bit harder to see, and some of these highways have labels on them. There's 180, 62, 180 here. So some of them are labeled, some of them are not. Okay, the other thing we need to go over is this big sort of like picket fence looking thing in magenta color. So let me zoom out so you can see kind of where this is coming from. We've lost some detail there. So this big area here looks like it's centered around Lubbock. This is an MOA, or a military operation area. Okay, this is Bronco 4 MOA. This section here is Bronco 3 MOA. So it's a military operation area. It tells you that there is military aircraft operation in this area. Okay, so it's not restricted. It just means you need to use caution flying in this area. You need to be looking out for military operations. Why are you looking out for military? Well, mainly because they're real fast. Not because they're going to shoot you down with missiles, but because they're typically really fast airplanes. And some of that activity is going to be running on instruments. They won't see you. and you may not see them, and they're going to be coming quickly. So use caution there. To find out more about that, you go to the chart supplement. You can actually go to the chart legend on a paper chart. Go to the chart legend, and then there's information on who to contact to find out what's going on in that MOA on that day. So you can actually find out whether there's activity there and what kind, so you know what to look out for. But you just use caution. Okay, here's a different airport. There's a private airport between Hobbs and Seminole. Here's a private here, and here's another private. It has an R. You can barely see it. It has an R for restricted. That means do not land there. All right, so here's another private one, but it's not restricted. So you might be able to land there, but when it says R for restricted, that just means don't land there without permission. All right, and let's see. Here's another symbol that's important to know. Let's see. Let's find it. Let's find a different one though. Yeah, here's one that's more relevant to us. So when we're flying around Hobbs Industrial, we may be doing some cross country. You may get low and think, here's an airport. You may see an airport and you look at the chart and it has this big X over it. These are not runway symbols. This is an X saying do not go there. This is saying no fly. Don't go to this airport. This is an old runway, and it's not any good for use anymore. You can see it. When you see it, you may think you can go land there, but there's trees and other hazards that would harm the aircraft. So that's a closed airport symbol. That's an X. All right, so the other thing as we discussed in airspaces, you notice this big faded magenta, the fuzzy magenta shape, a circle with a little outlet here. So what this is telling you is, if you recall from airspace, in this area we're flying in, this is class Echo airspace up to 18,000 feet, class Echo airspace. But remember, class Golf airspace, for go for it, Golf starts at the ground and comes up to 1,200 feet in this area. But when you get into this edge, when you get into the sharp side of the magenta circle here, that Golf airspace lowers down to 700, as we discussed on airspace. So inside, on the fuzzy side of the magenta circle, the inside of this, so from this fine line here all the way inside to the other fine line, basically everything captured inside this shape is class Golf airspace is 700 feet AGL. And then it raises up to 1,200 feet as you get outside of that. When you see this, what you need to know about this, and practically, who cares where class Golf airspace is? It's really not that significant practically. But what this should tell you is this airport has instrument approaches. It has at least one instrument approach. Instrument approaches, remember, are approaches where people can fly in on instruments without looking outside. Now, when it's clear day, they're supposed to be looking anyway, but they can fly in on instrument approaches, and this sort of protects, it lowers the controlled airspace down further, so there's more protection when people are flying on instruments. That's what that indicates. Okay, not all airports are going to have that. For instance, Denver City does not have instrument approach procedures. So you don't see that magenta faded circle in Denver City, nor does Seagraves. But Plains does have instrument approaches, and so you see the fuzzy magenta symbol there. And you notice if we go back down to Hobbs, of course they have an airline that flies in there, so of course they have instrument approaches. And you notice there's one this way, and that way to protect that airspace. So that gives you an idea of the instrument approaches at that airport. Again, the magenta circle just takes class Echo airspace. Instead of having a floor of 1,200 feet, it lowers the floor to 700 feet within that area. All right. And then you have other things like the New Mexico-Texas line here. Let's see if we can find something else that's going to be important. Of course, there's symbols for power lines, power lines here. There's all kinds of various things. There's elevation. Sometimes you'll have these contour lines. This is some kind of a stream or a river. We know there's no rivers around here, so this is like a dry riverbed. But you'll have the elevation figures around here every now and then to let you know what those elevations are. Let's see. All right, yeah, let's go back. Let's go to a bigger airport. So here's a Class Charlie airport. This is Lubbock. This is Lubbock International. Recall, so we see different symbols here. We see those long runways like we see at Hobbs Industrial. So the old Reese Air Force Base has long runways, no surprise there. That's why the symbol is like this. But they're magenta, which means there's no control tower, and it's private. You're actually not allowed to, I know you're not allowed to land here without permission. So we got the long runway symbols in Lubbock International as well, but they're blue, which means you get a control tower. But now we got some differences here. So here we go. So notice we have these hard magenta circles. This is not the same as the fuzzy ones. So the fuzzy ones talk about that they designate Class Golf airspace, Class Echo having a lower floor. But this is the upside down, the two-tiered wedding cake of a Class Charlie, Class C airport. And it even says, where is it at? Lubbock, Class C, Class Charlie. Okay, so it tells you what kind of airspace that is. So the magenta hard circles here are Class Charlie airspace. Now remember, this is a two-tiered wedding cake. So, and we have the designations here, which is a little bit skewed. But this tells you that the elevations for this section of the airspace goes from the surface to 7,300 feet. Surface to 7,300 feet is what this one is. Now this outer ring does not go to the surface. So this airport steps up and then out and then up again. The top surface of all this is 7,300 feet. Okay, the whole top surface of this thing, here and outside. But this outside ring only goes down to 4,500 feet MSL. Okay, so you can fly under this if you're below 4,500 feet MSL. And let's see, there's actually not any airports right underneath it. But say you're flying into Lubbock Executive and you need to fly a pattern like this, and you're gonna fly under the Class Charlie shelf, which is a common thing. You fly under it to land at this airport. That's fine as long as you stay under 4,500 feet MSL, which is pretty easy to do because Lubbock Executive is at 3,200 feet. So the traffic pattern is at 4,200 feet, which is pretty close, but not into 45. So as long as you stay below 45, you can fly under this without ever having to deal with the Lubbock control tower. So that's the designation of Class Charlie airspace. There's also a VOR, which you can see the compass rose here. There's a VORTAC here, and that VORTAC, the information for it is